Good morning, friends. This is Miss Susan, and I am going to do an art lesson review from a art class we had 3 weeks ago. So if you did not join me for the Mary Cassatt lesson, I'm going to be reviewing that now. So last week we had a lesson on Takashi Murakami, who is a contemporary Japanese artist and a printmaker. And the week before that, we had a lesson on Mary Cassatt, and she was very influenced by Japanese art and woodcutting and printing. So that is why I had a lesson on Murakami last week. So Mary Cassatt was an American-born painter. She was born in Pennsylvania in 1844, and she studied art at a university in Pennsylvania. She went on a trip to Paris with her family and decided that she really wanted to move to Paris. So she moved to Paris to become an artist and to study art. While she was there, she met the very famous artist, Edgar Degas, who we have studied before. We did a dancing project based on his artwork with The Little Dancer. So when she met him, he invited her to be one of the Impressionists. She was the only American-born Impressionist of the original group. So in our art newsletter from 3 weeks ago, you will find a lesson on doing monoprinting based on art by Mary Cassatt. So she was a very famous painter, and she was well known for doing oil paintings of women and children primarily, also families relaxing together at home. So we did a drawing in our online art lesson of our families. So we counted how many people were in our families. We started a drawing together. Here is an example that I was working on in class. So we started with faces first. So I did my face, my daughter's face, and my son's face. When I was drawing the faces out, I thought about each person and what made each person special. So my son is much taller than my daughter and I, so I made sure that he was up higher in the picture when I was doing my composition. I started with a pencil first so that I could erase it if I needed to, and then went back over with marker. And you can see I'd never completed this piece because we have a short class online together, but I wanted to give you just a basic example of what we did. We thought about our background, what is around you, where do you like to relax with your family? She drew a lot of children relaxing at home, as I mentioned. Sometimes there's one of a little girl relaxing in a chair, sometimes outdoors, but focused on family. So if you see a painting, an Impressionist painting specifically, with children and mothers relaxing together, that's probably a Mary Cassatt painting. So again, she was also very influenced by Japanese woodcut and printmaking. That's a form of printmaking. And she liked to do very simple printmaking projects. And one of the things she did was called monoprints. So a monoprint means making one print. So what I suggested in our newsletter is to go through your recycling and see if there's things that you could use to do your printing. So one of the things that I chose was a piece of aluminum foil. So I had this foil in my recycling, and I did paintings of flowers, and you'll see there are little gaps in between the petals because I used thick paint, put it on my foil, then I pressed it down on the paper and pressed it with the top of my hand. And when I pressed it with the top of my hand, the thick paint would spread out and print on my paper. So here's an example that I made. Every flower is printed separately. Some of them were printed with tin foil, and those were a little bit kind of softer images. Some of them I took a lid to a can and painted on it. So you want to make sure if you're doing that, it is something that has a smooth edge to it. You don't want anything rough where you could cut your fingers. So maybe the cap of a jar would work really well. Or if you have any plastic from like takeout food or something you might get from the grocery store that has a plastic lid that can be removed, you can also paint on the clear plastic so that when you press it down, you can actually see the paint spread out on your picture. So I'm going to hold it close for you for a moment so you can see all of the flowers that I added to mine. It's really fun doing a picture like flowers because you can turn it any way. There's no upside down to this image. You can turn it any direction that you think looks the best. I used watercolor paper. You can use any kind of paper that is good for paint. So sometimes if you use very thin paper, as your paper dries, it might get a little bit wrinkly. That's okay if it happens. But I use a thicker watercolor paper, and I use thicker tempera paint. If you use very thin paint, like watercolor, it does not work as well. If you have questions about making your own paint, if you do not have paint at home, if you look at the newsletter, I actually gave you directions for making your own paint if you would like to. So again, our lesson online in our art newsletter was doing the monoprint with Mary Cassatt. And then our lesson in our Zoom classroom, we did a drawing together of our family based on her paintings instead of her prints. So I'm going to show you an example of Mary Cassatt's work so we can see the mother and the child relaxing together. That's one of the images she's most famous for. She was the only American impressionist, invited by Edgar Degas, one of her very good friends. She studied with him, and he was a very big influence on her artwork. And I also wanted to show you an example of one of her prints. So this is one of Mary's famous prints. And when I was doing my monoprint with the flowers, I was actually thinking about the wallpaper in this image. So thank you so much for joining me today, friends. I hope that was a good little review for you in case you missed our online lesson. I'm going to be uploading more lessons throughout the summer. So if you want to keep checking in, then I will have more for you. See you on Friday, friends, as our last official class together. But again, you can join me throughout the summer for small little lessons. Thank you. Goodbye.